Welcome to Stories of Transformation, an NRCDV radio podcast production. We are excited to bring you a new mini-series honoring our mothers. Our guest interviewer is Casey King, Director of Programs and Prevention for NRCDV. She is also a member of the ACEDV Leadership Forum Steering Committee. Please join us as Casey brings attention to mothers or maternal caregivers of adult children exposed to domestic violence and their positive influence on the path to healing and resilience.
Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Casey Keene, and I'm pleased to be guest hosting for Honoring Our Mothers, the new Stories of Transformation podcast series from NRCDV. Joining me today is William Kellibrew of WCK Consulting and the William Kellibrew Foundation. William is a global advocate for human, civil, children's, and victims' rights, as well as a trauma survivor, and serves on the ACEDV Leadership Forum Steering Committee, a project of the NRCDV established to amplify the voices and experiences of adult children exposed to domestic violence. Welcome, William.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to talk to you today. And today we're talking about our mothers or maternal caregivers who experienced domestic violence. So my first question for you, William, when you think about your mother, what comes to mind?
She was lots of fun. I mean, she was absolutely fun. She was a giver. She always took care of kids in the neighborhood when they didn't have a meal, or her place was the place to go. I mean, we had 6 kids who lived in the house, so we all had ranging, for about maybe 10 years difference. So there were many kids of all ages and sizes in our home always. So that's what I think about.
So it was a full house with lots of energy happening in there.
Yeah, it was a lot of energy going on, and so she really and she was a dancer, and she loved dancing. She danced, I would say professionally, and so in the room, I mean, she really lit up the space.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, in terms of lessons that you learned from your mother, can you reflect on what some of those may have been?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that giving has its rewards, and in the sense that when we give, it should be unconditional, and she gave unconditionally. It cost her, and she sacrificed so much to give, and the reward I believe that she got was really about seeing people happy and seeing people enjoy life. That was what she gave, and I think she gave of herself that way, and that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. And so that's what I've been trying to emulate throughout my life. I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, I think that's such an important point about the rewards of giving. And you mentioned sacrifice too. And I mean, clearly your mother had, some trauma in her life. Are there certain ways that you saw her navigate that you can glean anything from in terms of how you live your own life? So it was difficult navigating that. And while I did not know she was navigating, through, what we've termed today as domestic violence or trauma, she was very much navigating those dynamics. As a single mom, raising 5 kids, and even her younger brother, she was raising the 6th kid in her home. I saw her navigate those relationships through turmoil, through being hurt physically, verbally. She seemed to have been, have always kind of fought her way through relationships to, get through those kinds of relationships. And so I think the way that I have taken, those lessons and applied them to today is through my own relationships, and how
I focus on healthy relationship building. When we're kids, those things may not be comprehensive or comprehensible, and for me, they weren't. But so I did go through those teenage years not understanding what healthy relationships were, and getting into fights and getting into experiences where it just wasn't healthy relationships. And so I learned so much from the kind of therapy, the kind of engagement that healthy engagement can produce. And so today I sort of much better off in my relationships, having learned. I mean, it's a hard lesson to learn. It's really a harsh lesson to learn, the way that my mom went through those relationships, and I felt myself in a cycle that I didn't even know I was in a cycle, but eventually getting to where I am today. It's I'm glad I learned, but I always wish people would not have to learn this way.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really important point. And I'm wondering, because you talk about, these qualities that your mom had. She's fun. She's a giver. It seems like, all the neighborhood kids wanted to be, around her, going to be in your space.
Oh, yeah.
There's something like just feels really nurturing about that, and the fact that it was lively. I imagine if she's a dancer, there must have been music and things like that. So I wonder if you can reflect on how maybe those things, or maybe there's other things that help to build your capacity for resilience, for thriving, for enjoying life, that maybe came from your mom's example.
Well, one of the things that my mom did, she was a fighter in every sense of the word. I don't think she ever gave up. She continued to push forward, even in really difficult times. So whether she was trying to figure out where our next meal was going to come from, to the kind of discipline in our home that was, sometimes very strict and very straightforward and direct. And while, some of the things I probably wouldn't agree with today that my mom did when I was a kid, I think that she was still a mom, and she was really doing the best that she could do as a mom. And so, I don't relegate it to just, there's no excuse for some of the things I think that happened as a kid, because I think that, I don't, so like, for instance, I don't support corporal punishment, but my mom, she supported corporal punishment because we did get disciplined as children. But, when you think about those times, you think about those days, you think about how we were disciplined that way, she was doing probably something that a lot of moms did in those days. But growing up, I've really learned, and she's giving me such a perspective, and in which I appreciate. So I've been able to build on that perspective growing up, and really, really learning from her. And just a tail end of that question, can you repeat that so I can make sure that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, as you're speaking, I'm hearing some qualities that I have experienced, of you. Like, for example, you say she never gave up, kind of that perseverance.
Right.
I can see that perseverance in you. I can see that coming through.
Yeah.
And so I guess, the second part of the question was really just wondering, about the ways in which you are resilient and how they might be reflections of, things that your mother has instilled,
So when I think of resilience, I really think I was actually a sixth grade spelling bee champ. I mean, I won the third place. I didn't get the first place, but I still consider it being a champ. And and so when I think about words, I really look to meaning, and resilience I have defined, as the ability to bounce back from adversity, and I'm taking it from Merriam-Webster's as well. This whole idea of bouncing back from adversity, sickness, depression, and it lists all of these things. But there's a key question to me about resiliency that I think it's important to understand. We have to take it just a step further and say, well, what are we bouncing back to? And my mom although we had a rough time as kids, we always bounced back to, food on the table. We've always bounced back to somebody who was a fierce protector of us. We always bounced back to fun times. We always bounced back to those seafood nights and those prayers at the Thanksgiving table. And so she was such a family-oriented person. And so today I see myself as a convener. Even in my workspace or my professional life, I see myself as a nurturer, as somebody who takes care of and cares for others in a way that protects their rights as well as my own. And so I've become a huge global advocate for children's rights, those who are can be considered most vulnerable. And I really get upset when I see people's rights being trampled upon. And so my mom, as I mentioned earlier, she was a fierce protector and a fighter for those kinds of rights. And so she was never going to let anybody, hurt her kids or those kids who were in the neighborhood or family. So I think I've gained that perspective from her, and to continue to fiercely protect those values and those qualities.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And I really love what you said there about what are we bouncing back to. I think it's a question that, I haven't heard before except from you. And I think it's a challenging one, but it's so helpful to think about in terms of, just looking toward who we want to be, right? And
that's right.
I feel like it's amazing that she, despite the obstacles in her way, was able to give you something positive and fun and healing to bounce back to. And that I imagine that you have those, places you bounce back to now in your life as you kind of go on in your life without her. So I know we haven't said yet, during the course of this podcast that your mother did pass away when you were just a kid. And what I hear from you is just, a great deal of respect and love for her. And so I wonder if you can share with our audience kind of how you do honor her in your daily life. Kind of, it's been many years since you lost your mother. Are there particular ways that you can share with us that you honor her?
Yeah, I think there are a few ways that I believe that I honor her, and specifically, I can think back to our 25th anniversary of her and my brother's death, and the first time I actually lit the candle at an event, and I had no idea over 25 years that it just never occurred to me that I could light these two candles to honor them, and so. Keeping candles today have a different meaning for me, and so I literally keep a couple of candles in the house, and they're electric candles in the house, and oftentimes, during special holidays or whenever I feel like it, I'll put those candles on in her memory, in my brother's memory. I think the second thing that I do is I honor her by treating my own grandmother, her mother, with the kind of respect and gratefulness and thankfulness for her jumping in, to take care of my siblings and I. And so she has been a stalwart for rights. For our own individual rights. She has been taking care of us and been caregiver for so long. And the way that I honor her is that I got myself on track in terms of my healing, in terms of my responsibilities. I really turned things around in my life and got myself on track so that she didn't have to worry anymore, that I could say to my grandmother, you did a great job. You don't have to worry about me at this point. And that is where I am today. And then I think the third way is the work that I do. I focus on domestic violence. I focus on sexual assault. I focus on polyvictimization. I focus on trauma. I do a deep dive to be able to understand not just the prevalence of trauma or, what kinds of trauma are out there in different environments, but also, recognizing the role that it plays in the lives of the people that we engage every day, that we serve every day. And then I take the knowledge that I've learned from, my studies, from my research, from my background, gathering information, or my engaging others, and I use that information to make good of it and to, put it out to the public, to bring conversation, to engage and encourage conversations about the impact, but also as important as the impact is what do we do about it? And so I've become this beacon in a sense, and people tell me this. I don't want to say that I've become a beacon because I wanted to be a beacon. I think I have taken the passion to want to do something about it. And people have said, you know what? You're a shining light. I'm really inspired by you. And so those are the things that keep me going is when people tell me what difference I've made. That's the only reason I think, or the biggest reason that I've even involved, because people say, you have something that, can be very inspiring. And so they were inspired by my resiliency. And so that's been fueling me the entire way, just knowing that people care about what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and they really do, and I think that it's true. I mean, your story is inspiring, and I think that I think there's a lot of listeners who will just identify with your experience and the journey that you've been on. And I also want to say just how grateful I am that you brought up your grandmother and her really important role in your life. And I want to give you a moment, if you would, to reflect on ways that she may have helped build your resilience along the way as well, because I understand that she's part of the reason that you are on the path that you're on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and appreciate that sentiment. And I watched her resiliency over a course of many, many years. I mean, even the 38 years she worked on her job. I mean, I didn't watch all of those years, but she got up every day and went to work. And, I recognized that many years later that she was getting up every day and putting everything on the line. And I didn't appreciate that as a teenager. I didn't appreciate that in my early 20s, but I finally got the opportunity before she passed away, or she's still alive today, but before she would end her life on this earth in any kind of way, I'm so glad I got a chance to realize it while she knows that I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that we've
really
had this opportunity. It is a gift, and it's I'm so glad that we've had this opportunity to honor both your mother and your grandmother in this way. And I wonder, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to say to our audience, or anything else that you want to say along the lines of just honoring their lives?
Yeah, I don't have much to say, but I think that there's something positive and energizing about keeping the conversation going, and not letting or allowing the subject of domestic violence or any of the trauma dictate that we should be silent. And so I think that keeping this podcast going and keeping the conversation going and continue to do the work that even you do is very important. And I think it honors victims and survivors and those who have lost their lives, who have sacrificed, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally, has sacrificed their lives for this particular cause. And so I thank you for the opportunity to continue the dialogue, to give us a space where we could talk about these kinds of things. And I think that really is where the healing and resiliency comes in, is that we share a common purpose, and that is to address the issues that are most pressing in our lives. And we happen to connect around domestic violence, but in so many other victimizations and issues that actually occur. So this is a positive conversation, a positive space to do that in. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Thank you for sharing your story for our Honoring Our Mothers podcast series. It's truly been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So please stay tuned for more stories in this series from members of the ACEDV Leadership Forum. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
listen to Stories of Transformation, an NRCDV radio podcast production. To learn more about the ACE-DV Leadership Forum, visit nrcdv.org/ACE-DV. If you are seeking support as a person who has been personally impacted by domestic violence, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can hear our other podcasts and access additional resources on gender-based violence and related topics at nrcdv.org. NRCDV radio podcasts are brought to you by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence and supported by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Family and Youth Services Bureau.